Get off my land. That's what she screamed in my face, standing on my porch like she owned it. The irony. This was my family's cabin, outside her HOA. What followed turned into the ugliest neighborhood war I've ever seen. Tell me, what would you do if someone tried to steal your land? The first time I stepped onto that porch again, it felt like unlocking a memory I didn't know I still carried. The boards groaned under my boots, just like they had when I was a kid chasing my dad down to the water. The air smelled of pine needles and lake water, sharp and nostalgic, like breathing in an entire childhood at once. The cabin looked exactly as I remembered, weathered siding, faded trim, and windows that rattled when the wind blew just right. To anyone else, it was old and worn out. To me, it was priceless. It wasn't just a structure. It was my inheritance, my father's dream, and now my responsibility. Every corner of it whispered with his presence, from the rusty anchor ring bolted to the dock, to the old toolbox left on the steps. I thought this would be my sanctuary, my break from the chaos of city life. A quiet place to rest, fish, and finally breathe. But I was wrong. Because no matter how peaceful a lake looks at sunrise, peace doesn't last long. Not when you have neighbors like mine waiting to pick a fight. It happened on my second morning there. I was wiping down the porch rail, enjoying the view, when I heard footsteps. Fast, heavy, determined. They didn't sound friendly. "Excuse me." A sharp voice cut through the morning air like a blade. I turned around and nearly laughed. She was mid-40s. Hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Jogging outfit that screamed control freak. Clipboard in one hand, a paper in the other. "You need to get off my land immediately," she snapped, shoving the paper toward me. "This is community property under HOA jurisdiction, and you are in violation." I blinked at her, then looked at the paper. It was a violation notice, with a $75 fine, for standing on the porch my dad had built 40 years ago. "Ma'am, this is my family's cabin," I said evenly. "We've owned it for decades." Her lips curled like I'd said something offensive. "No. All lakefront property visible from the community falls under HOA oversight. You're in violation. End of story." I showed her a utility letter proving my property was outside HOA jurisdiction. She barely glanced at it, waved it away, and muttered, "Administrative oversight. We're correcting that." That was the moment I realized she wasn't bluffing. She actually believed she owned it. 3 days later, I walked out with my coffee and stopped dead. A bright yellow plastic barrier stretched across my dock. Not near it. Not beside it. Directly across it. Anchored to my steel ring that had been there since the 1960s. There was a placard zip-tied to it. Temporary Environmental Protection Measure. HOA authorization. Except there was no construction. No erosion project. Nothing. Just a wall across my lake access, installed without a word to me. I stood there in my pajamas, mug in hand, staring at it like maybe it would vanish if I blinked hard enough. The audacity was breathtaking. I thought about calling the county, but then I remembered my father's old words. "Sometimes, son, you've got to clear your own path." I walked back to the porch, opened Dad's old toolbox, and there they were. Heavy-duty bolt cutters, solid as the day he bought them. I could almost hear his voice. "Don't wait for permission when you already own the land." So I marched down to the dock, positioned the cutters around the first steel cable, and squeezed. Snap! The current tugged at the barrier instantly, sagging and drifting downstream. It felt good. Too good. But before I could cut the second cable, I heard it. Footsteps on gravel. Fast. Angry. "What do you think you're doing?" I turned. Karen was storming toward me, with 2 clipboard-carrying board members. And that's when the real war began. I stood tall, bolt cutters still in my hands, as she closed the distance. "You just destroyed community safety equipment," she barked. "That barrier was preventing erosion runoff." I raised an eyebrow. "Installed overnight? On my property? Without permission? That's not erosion control. That's trespassing." Her face flushed red, and she shifted tactics. "Fine, but you should know this anchor ring is crucial for our fire safety water access. By cutting it, you're endangering lives." That was lie number 2. My anchor ring had been there decades before their development even existed. When that didn't work, She pulled out her checkbook. $200 if you move the anchor ring 5 feet closer to shore. Everyone wins. She actually tried to bribe me on my own dock. I laid the cutters down with a loud clank and stared her down. I don't need your money to use my own property. Her mask slipped. I saw the control freak under the facade, desperate to bend reality to her will. You'll regret this, she hissed. And maybe I should have been scared. But I wasn't. I was furious. Furious enough to record everything. I pulled out my phone and hit record. Tell me again, I said, pointing the camera at her. You're claiming you own the water in front of my dock. She straightened, suddenly smiling for the camera. Yes, the HOA has oversight of all visible waterfront property. It was so absurd, I almost laughed. But I didn't, because deep down, I knew she was just getting started. That night, the real harassment began. At exactly 11 p.m., a buzzing sound filled the air. I pulled back my curtains and froze. Drones. Tiny surveillance drones hovering outside my bedroom window. Red lights blinking like sniper scopes. At first, I thought it was coincidence. But by the third night, I knew better. They rotated in shifts, from 11 p.m. until 5 a.m., every single night. Organized. Precise. Deliberate. Sleep deprivation. Intimidation. Psychological warfare. By day, Karen's crew smiled and waved like friendly neighbors. By night, their drones turned my cabin into a spotlighted target. But my dad hadn't raised me to be a victim. Saturday morning, I built a live stream rig with scrap wood, cables, and an old phone mount. That night, instead of cowering behind curtains, I broadcast the harassment live. The world saw the blinking red lights, the drones circling, the absurd intimidation. And for the first time since moving in, I slept through the night. But deep down, I knew Karen wouldn't stop there. She wasn't losing control. She was just changing tactics. Monday morning, I got a visit from Hank, Dad's best friend, the man who'd helped build half the improvements on this land. He sat in Dad's old chair, coffee in hand, avoiding eye contact. Luke, he said, neighbors are worried. Rebecca's saying you're interfering with safety equipment. Maybe there's room for compromise. The word hit like a gut punch. Compromise? On my land? I reminded him he'd helped Dad install that anchor ring. He knew the boundaries. He knew the truth. But I could see it in his eyes, doubt. She'd gotten to him. For the first time, I felt isolated. Alone. Even betrayed. I stared out at the calm lake, wondering if maybe I was wrong. Maybe Karen had a point. Maybe I was being unreasonable. But then I remembered her lies. Her bribes. Her drones. No, this wasn't about compromise. It was about control. And I wasn't going to let her win. That weekend, I turned my living room into a war room. Lights. Camera. Evidence spread across the table. Property surveys. County letters. Video recordings of harassment. I went live. Neighbors started joining the stream. One by one, they shared their own stories. A retired engineer showed diagrams, proving the harassment lights targeted only my cabin. Another neighbor revealed she'd gotten a fake violation for painting her dock. The pattern was clear. Karen's authority wasn't law. It was manipulation. By noon, 8 neighbors were active in the chat, documenting her overreach. For the first time, it wasn't just me versus Karen. It was the community against her lies. And with each new story, my resolve grew stronger. The HOA meeting was coming. She'd try to make her final play. But this time, I'd be ready. The community center was packed. Families, neighbors, even teenagers curious about the drama. I went first. Calmly, I presented the evidence. Surveys proving I was outside HOA jurisdiction, utility letters confirming it, and video proof of the harassment. People listened. Some nodded. Then Karen stood. With her usual confidence, she waved an official-looking document. A federal environmental emergency declaration gives U.S. oversight of all lakefront property. Gasps rippled through the room. For a moment, I felt my heart sink. If it was real, everything I'd fought for was gone. But something about the formatting looked wrong. So I did the only thing I could. I pulled out my phone and called the county environmental office on speaker. The room went silent. There is no federal declaration for your lake, the official said flatly. We have no record of it. Silence broke into chaos. Karen's face turned crimson. Neighbors whispered, pointing at the forged paper in her hands. In one moment, her entire empire of lies collapsed. But the look she gave me as she left said only one thing: this isn't over. 2 days later, county officials arrived. Rebecca Walsh, HOA president, self-proclaimed ruler of the lake, was fined for tampering with safety equipment and stripped of all authority. The harassment lights came down. The barriers disappeared. And for the first time, my porch faced the lake the way Dad intended, peaceful and free. But the real victory wasn't mine alone. Neighbors formed a new environmental committee, built on transparency and cooperation. They even asked me to join. Standing on that dock, I realized something Dad had always known. True power doesn't come from control. It comes from respect. Karen had lost everything by lying. But by standing firm, I gained something priceless. A community worth fighting for. So let me ask you, what would you have done if HOA Karen stormed onto your porch demanding your land? Would you have paid the fine, walked away, or stood your ground like I did? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and stick around. I've got more wild tales coming your way. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Because sometimes, the loudest person claiming authority isn't the one protecting what matters. Sometimes, the real protectors are the ones who refuse to give in.